Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum viewers. I'm your host Sultan Hali, presenting another edition of Defense and Diplomacy. The relationship between India and Pakistan has been swinging like a seesaw. But unfortunately, there have been more downs and less ups. And that is because core issues like the issue of Kashmir and a number of other issues have existed. However, the light at the end of the tunnel is that Pakistan and India have decided to get together and sort out these issues and improve their relations, which is not only a pragmatic approach, but is going to benefit the region as a whole. To discuss this very important issue, we are honored to have in our studio today Ambassador Aslam Rizvi, who has had the distinction of serving in the Pakistan Air Force as a fighter pilot and then later in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and has served as ambassador in a number of capitals. Welcome, sir. We have with us Salma Malik, who is a renowned analyst and in the staff of the Quaid-e-Azam University, where she is teaching young students. Welcome. Let's start the discussion with you, sir. How do you see the breakthrough that has come about in the intense relations which we have had so far between Pakistan and India?
As you know, we are about to reach the 3rd anniversary of the Mumbai attack. At that point, our composite dialogue was progressing very well, and we were almost on the verge of normalizing our relations with India. Since then, as you mentioned rightly, we had a sort of up and down relations with India. One day that we talked about Thimphu's spirit, another day it was something else. What has happened at Maldives and Nadu is, as the foreign minister described, from a spirit to a hope. It has certainly been a very positive development, and the body languages at that time, the statements made by both the leadership has given hope indeed that relations will normalize. And prior to this, of course, there were a number of secretary level meetings. We've also had a meeting of the ministers, and lately there have been further contacts, and especially there is now going to be the meeting of the commerce ministers in 2012. So there is a very positive development that has taken place from there. It is something which is going to benefit both countries, and prior to this we saw that there were gestures on both sides. For example, we had from India supporting Pakistan's seat on the Security Council,
which was, of course, quid pro quo, because we supported them last year.
Of course, as well as our special concessions, the objections they had dropped for EU trade with the EU. So these are the on the other side. In Pakistan,
other than that, also the military helicopter of India strayed into Pakistan, and Pakistan had captured it, but within a few hours it returned it, which is a gesture of goodwill.
Yes.
And then Pakistan's Prime Minister supported the re-election of the Secretary General of the Commonwealth Institution at Australia very recently.
That's right, and also importantly, the other thing was the grant of the MFN.
We'll come to that in a little while. Just kindly hold that thought, sir. Salma Malik, what's your opinion? These developments that have taken place, some of which were articulated by the ambassador?
Well, that speaks of a lot of hope, but unfortunately, if I take a rather pessimistic perspective, looking at how the past developments have been, there have been a lot of improvements in the past as well, which are worthy of mention. But unfortunately, what happens is that one small incident or one big incident of the scale of Mumbai or something of that retards the entire process. So where all of these steps which Ambassador Rizvi has mentioned are very welcomed, and they speak of a maturity in the relationship which may actually lead to betterment of regional dynamics, unfortunately the minuses are also on the other side piled up pretty high. And
are you alluding, let's say, to the Indus Water Treaty of 1960, in which, in goodwill, Pakistan surrendered a number of rivers to India?
Yes.
It held out for quite many years, but recently we see India violating it.
India violating it, and fortunately for us, as to the decision that has recently been made on that, the other factor is the conditionalities, which we don't really speak about when we are entering into such positive dynamics, but the conditionalities very much remain when we are actually looking into the looking beyond the rhetoric and looking at the real brass tacks of how to handle things. Then of course Afghanistan is yet another very thorny issue which indirectly affects India-Pakistan's relations, and rather it has now started to directly affect the relationship. So those are three very important impediments that would keep on resurfacing whenever some positive dynamics are taking place with
regards to India. No, but it is good that you have provided a reality check, and we cannot say that the picture is entirely rosy, and we have to be cognizant of what are the impediments, and it helps to overcome them.
But at the same time, I mean, the very fact as to the small incremental steps at the international level that have taken place speak of a factor that at least both the countries, in whatever sense, they are willing to support each other for some common good. And if that common good is further explored and really looked at from the regional perspective to actually better the relationship between the two countries and ease problems for the people, then it is a wonderful thing. And if you really take the spirit any further, even the 8 conditionalities for the composite dialogue process, or whatever nomenclature we would like to give it, would not really remain an issue. It can really go beyond it. And if it becomes a people-centric thing, that is something that we really have to focus on.
Ambassador Rizvi, you mentioned the MFN. Now, in 1995, as a prerequisite to the WTO's regulations, India granted the MFN status to Pakistan. And now we have also taken the decision to grant India the same status. How do you look at it? And do you think it has negative connotations or positive, or what?
Well, we took quite some time to reciprocate the grant, which is mandatory under the WTO. In fact, MFN is the cornerstone of the multilateral regime of WTO. MFN doesn't mean preferential trade treatment. It is, most favored nation treatment, and it is obligatory on part of Pakistan to allow the same to India as with the rest of the world. It's been a long time coming. There's no doubt about it. I think there were 2 reasons for the delay. Partly it was because of political and the economic factor. I think politically, a realization is there that trade is a good platform, a good vehicle for promoting bilateral relations, bringing stability and mutual vested interest in each other's country. As far as the economic aspect is concerned, there is a fear that India, with its huge market, more developed as it is, would bring harm to the industries in Pakistan. I think the latter is a bit misplaced. We are, apart from the fact that we have a certain regime with trade with India, which is allowed under the WTO, that you can have special relations, in which we have what we call the positive list and what we call the negative list from there. So even though you will open out trade, there is a possibility that you can safeguard your business interests here. Now, the first thing that is going to take place is, as has happened after the Commerce Secretary's meeting recently, is that Pakistan is going to move away from the positive list of about 2,000 items to a negative list, which may be up to about 10,000 items. That's the first step that we are going to go through. And then the second step would be that we will work towards a preferential trade agreement with India. Now, it is very important that this decision that has been taking place is a roadmap which is a very positive one, because we have given a deadline that in February the list will be finalized. It will be accepted by the government. And
2012.
the announcement will be 2012, in February 2012. So it's a very positive step. And the reservations by the business communities are partly first offset by the fact that we are having now their concessions that are going to have for next 2 years in the European Union. Secondly, when you have the restricted or the negative list, the areas which are of concern to them can be put on that, can be safeguarded. In fact, we have two major industries that are seem to be affected by that, or are deemed to be considered. One is the automobile, and the other is pharmaceutical. Now, we have special arrangements also with China, and we have this is automobile is a ban from there. Secondly, same with the pharmaceuticals, we have some drugs. But if you look at the economy of scale that this provides, I think even the automobile engineering, if we are cooperating, as you saw, there was the sale had dropped here and also in India on the automobiles. Secondly,
but talking about automobiles, if you notice, like let's take the case of Suzuki. Yes. Now this is one car which is being manufactured or assembled in Pakistan as well in India. But there is a huge gap in the price.
Yes.
So you think we'll be able to address that kind of a thing?
I'm about to say that. And also look at the pharmaceutical industries. I mean, we have allowed one medicine, for example, which we import from China, which is, hardly is 3 times made locally. So in China, from India, if your medicines is also imported, the overall effect will be that it will be for the consumers, for the people, who will have better quality and will have a lower price. So it will benefit the common people.
Right. So, Salma, Malik, how do you look at this MFN aspect?
Well, there are 2-3 things to it. Number one, of course, the very fact that the constituencies which are never going to support Pakistan going for the MFN, and the very fact that Pakistan delayed the process for a very long time would always be, I mean, you have very little investment in peace constituency, you have a lot of investment and a lot of takers of the conflict constituency. So that factor was always there, and the government really had to look at all the concerns. But now the very issue that has made the government decide about it, besides so many other things the ambassador has mentioned here, is also the fact that this trade differential and all is really creating a lot of trouble, because there's a lot of informal economy that is going on. Then there's this routing of economy through UAE and other channels, which is really affecting these countries. But the next step, besides all these technicalities, the commercial attaches and other people they have to look into, is the very fact that there has to be also that environment created alongside the dry ports and the entry points that there are. And they may be very small issues. For example, I was speaking to one of my counterparts who is working on the economic side, and they said that you're not even allowed to have your transportations beyond a certain point, which can be worked out. And it cannot be animal transportation. There may not be certain things. Very, very small issues which actually end up creating a lot of waste of time and energy in the process. So those things need to be worked out, and actually very interestingly, the people who are working in that micro sector have become quite innovative in addressing these problems at an informal level. So those things really have to be looked into. Second point is that it's not only India-Pakistan trade that we are talking about. Next, of course, is the transit trade routing for Afghanistan, and also the fact that there's been a lot of pressure on Pakistan for signing the MFN. And then, of course, the transit trade for
Indian goods to going into Afghanistan.
Between Afghanistan and India. But no one has really looked at the fact that there's hardly any transit allowed between Nepal, Bangladesh, Bhutan or Bangladesh. India doesn't really allow those things. So, I mean, you really have to look at the regional picture. But again, if I go back to the fact that would it really help domestically for the people, for commerce, for trade, yes, it will. For those who are always against such things, they will keep on playing up. But the very fact is that the one impediment to signing the MFN and taking the trade route towards opening a cooperative corridor was the very fact that you had to look at the larger picture, settle Kashmir first or settle other contentious issue first, and then go for trade and commerce, which would always be there. But of course, the alternate perspective is trade first, and then let's see the other things will fall in their right place. So
if you permit, Ambassador, let's look at it diplomatically. Salma mentioned trade. You were talking about trade too. Now, let's take the example of China. China and Taiwan, we know they have a very serious contentious issue. But the important thing is that China and Taiwan enjoy a tremendous trade agreement. And China has also made overtures to India, and now India and China are enjoying similar agreements. And China has recommended to Pakistan that you should have trade relations with India because it will help smoothen out some of the problems which you mentioned, like Kashmir, of course, is the most contentious, and then the water issue, and so on. So how do you look at trade resolving all these, and whether it's putting the horse before the cart or the cart, I mean, what do we do first?
Well, let me just give an example of India and Bangladesh relations, and especially trade relations. The trade between because of the MFN and preferential trade treatment agreement that they have with Bangladesh, the Bangladesh has benefited in many ways by way of cheaper imports of raw material, which they have used to value add their textiles and other goods and to export outside. The economy has almost to 6% and so on because of the neighboring country as well. And importantly, because of improved relations, they have been able to resolve their, the territorial dispute of almost 4,000 square miles, plus 162, 163 enclaves that were there. Now, this would not have been possible in isolation. So those who say that Kashmir, we should put contention to that, I think is an issue which is, very complex, and it was not a simple solution. And as we see in this example of trade, it has helped a neighboring country. So perhaps we should not say that it should be contingent to a solution. It can go parallel to that. Exactly. We can work on a double track on that. Now, from the point of view of the trade with India, you see, we have also seen that there is a political will on both sides for improvement of relations. This we have seen over the leadership in both India and Pakistan, but there have been always something or the other which has caused these progress from making much progress on that. Simultaneously with that, we've also seen of late a people-to-people movement. We've also seen a peace movement taking place, the initiative taken by the media and the initiative taken by the businessmen.
And also now, in sports. I mean, the Hali, you see, match in the World Cup cricket was a clear example.
Yes, yes. So you see, like Aman ki Asha and so on, these things are contributing and bringing pressure. Now, it is also said, and it's rather telling, that during the SAARC summit, the Indian Prime Minister querying whether the Pakistan Army is on board on MFN. Well, I think maybe the Prime Minister could have asked him likewise on their side how keen they are for Indian side is there, because we know on Siachen they are the ones who are dragging their feet. But I think the army is certainly realizing that there is a economic downturn in the country, and the resources will be limited. Imagine if we are able to resolve the major issue of Siachen alone, how much tremendous saving there would be for the army. And the millions that we are spending there. So I think it's a win-win situation for both sides, that we should address the problems. And it has been said that through the track to diplomacy, we had almost come to 90% of all the problems and the issues that were involved in, whether it was in Kashmir or Sir Creek or Siachen, they were addressed. So what we need to do now is to reactivate the back door and try and bridge the remaining gap, And then we should, as expected, next year there should be the Joint Commission has been reactivated, has been agreed that it will be held again. And so it is ready to come up with a positive outcome and not be, come into a situation like we had in July or 2010 when the Indian Foreign Minister was here.
Right.
So I think there is a good hope, and there is a good possibility that we are able to build on what has happened now and really bring about normalization of relations with India.
Point taken. So Salma, how do you look at it? The ambassador thinks that trade can take precedence and the other issues can be resolved, because once you set to talking, you are closer, a kind of a bonhomie or camaraderie is established.
Exactly. I mean, I would definitely support that at least do some positive talking, which is result oriented. I mean, we have what both these countries have done so far is we talk a lot. We talk to each other, we don't talk with each other, we don't really get into the type of dialogue which ends up resolving something. We've had endless rounds, whatever you want to call it. You can call it Swaran Singh, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto negotiations, this thing, that thing during Zia's time, during Benazir Bhutto's time. So many tracks have taken place, parallel, diplomat, track 1, track 2. As well as back channel diplomacy, everything has been worked out. Unfortunately, something or the other stops the process from really going to the 100%. It is very right that smaller issues such as Siachen, which are cost intensive, but not really tagged into the bigger conflict, or Sir Creek, as you just mentioned, can really be solved. But unfortunately, they by themselves don't carry any dynamics. What they basically feed into is the larger picture. You resolve the border problem, that means that you're really getting into converting these things into something permanent. So that becomes a major impediment, and actually it's nothing more than that. But whatever constituencies our intelligencies or the military institution is taken as the bad boys, however, if we look at them, they do precisely the same. So it's a lot of mirror imaging that takes place. But I mean, if really the leadership wants to do something for the people, all they need to do is go and take a look at the people queued up outside the embassies or the high commissions of respective countries, and they will actually understand the plight.
Applying for visas to visit each other.
For applying visas to visit each other. It's actually deplorable. I'm not saying that the conditions, I mean, the embassies are not cooperating. They are doing whatever they can. But the overall restrictive visa regimes, the amount of paper formalities and the type of clearances and all of those things that have to come about really takes the entire thing to a totally different level. And that really speaks for the fact that there's a lot of trust deficit, there's a lot of problems that really need to be ironed out, and unless and until we do that, none of the talks that we are doing is really going to go beyond the casual issue. And of course, so long as that doesn't take place, this is really not going to. And just one last word that I would say is that what would actually work out better is whether we take Kashmir first or we take trade first, but the ideal situation would be that all 8 tracks are worked out simultaneously.
Right, point taken. I'm afraid we are at the end of this program. Viewers, both our eminent panelists are of the opinion that Pakistan and India have made a good beginning. It is important that we are talking to each other. It is important that we have developed a understanding towards trust deficit, towards bridging the gap, and the MFN is an important step in that. We are hopeful that once Pakistan and India set down their cards on the table and talk to each other, it is the people of both countries which are going to benefit, because ultimately they are the losers when there is a shortage of peace. So I would like to thank you, Ambassador Aslam Rizvi, for your very cogent comments, and Salma Malik for your very kind comments. Viewers, keep watching us and hope to see you next week, inshallah. Allah Hafiz.